to all of you from the first moment in my hearings here in the Parliament that as soon as I came into this position, I asked for clear explanations about all of the issues of safety on the Greek railways. And immediately afterwards, once I had a full picture of the serious shortcomings in the safety of the railways, on the 16th of December 2024, only 2 weeks after I took up my duties, I started the infringement procedures against Greece. The most decisive and strongest tool that Europe has for its members. An infringement procedure refers in particular to the implementation of European legislation on rail safety, and particularly the 2016 the directive from 2016, number 798, on railway safety. There is a very clear reference in that legislation to important systemic shortcomings on the railways. And I called once again, just a week ago, in a meeting with the Greek Minister for Transport. And as you have understood, Greece has come up with an action plan to address all of the issues which will need to be addressed so that as quickly as possible the Greek railways can be rendered safe. Now, ensuring rail safety is the responsibility of the member state and the national authorities. That's stated by the legislation in Europe. That's not the European Commission, either in, of course, it doesn't have any legal, judiciary or investigatory powers. The rollout of that action plan for Greece is one, however, that we will be monitoring very closely and evaluating it on an ongoing basis. So over these last 2 months, I have appeared in the various committees and I have been presenting comments on this, but we need to monitor this and ensure it's implemented. So within an agreed time frame as well, on the basis of the last progress report sent to the Commission by the Ministry, we noted that generally speaking, the progress is good. However, what I stressed to the Greek Ministry is that the various steps have to be accelerated so that they can be properly implemented. Greece is putting in serious efforts to correct these massive systemic problems which have existed for decades on the Greek railways. However, ladies and gentlemen, time is running. That means that huge strides have to be made on all fronts. I can assure you that if we ever notice the tiniest delay or shortcoming in implementation of this action plan, right then we will proceed to an infringement steps in the next stages against Greece. Members of the European Parliament, as I said, we are very closely monitoring the progress being made on this. And we're being consistent in our efforts and strict, but we are also ready to provide every possible technical support to Greece so that the Greek railways can become modern, safe and workable railways, which is something that all Greek citizens deserve. All European citizens. And we do the same thing with any country which requires our technical support. So to conclude, I would just like to make one final point, and our decision to revise the the directive on the European Agency for the Railways. The aim being to strengthen its role in monitoring the implementation of European legislation in member states, so that any problem which arises can be can be corrected and technical support can be provided. We want the ERA to become more effective in the member states. So we're going to present our proposals in a few months by early 2026. So I can assure you once again that what I said from the very first moment strictly applies. That is, that safety is my non-negotiable first priority, and I shall implement this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Commissioner. On behalf of the EPP Group, Madame Bosenberg.
Thank you, President. In 2016, there were 26 dead in Italy, 2016 in Germany, 12 died, and in Spain in 2013 there was a derailment, 80 dead, 40 injured. I'm not going to continue with this, colleagues. So why were these cases not debated here? Why is it only the tragedy in Tempe that's being discussed 2 years later, when the President of the European Parliament made a statement in March this year? Because the opposition in Greece, which has triggered this debate, felt that the legal government could be brought down if it was shown or claimed to be the only body responsible and therefore should be made criminals of a whole range of ministers in our country. The government from the first moment recognised the shortcomings and the mistakes and has taken steps to improve the system and to implement safety works with decent funding. And there's also been a progress report on, and this has just been mentioned by the Commissioner as well, working together with the Commission in order to strengthen the safety of our railways. Legislative steps have been taken also. The government is speeding up the various different steps, looking into the reasons behind this tragedy, although we have seen various families various people being taken to court and in respect of the rights of the victims' families. Greece is a country based on the rule of law with institutions that work, and the Greek population is asking for justice, and that will be granted by the independent judiciary in our country. The government in all areas, including in the safety of transport, will be judged by the Greek people 2 years on during our elections. Thank you.
Much, Madam Bosenberg. Mr. Maniatis, you have the floor.
Colleagues, we are debating the tragedy of Tempe, a rail accident which really shook my country. And we're debating it today because we are facing a double scandal. The first scandal is the tragedy of a crash between two trains on the same line, and the fact that no safety system worked, leading to the death of 57 of our fellow citizens, mainly young people, a crime for which the services as well as their political leaders have to pay. They were aware of the issues of safety but did nothing to correct them, although there was European funding on works, but 9 years on, the works had not been completed. That was a project that, had it been completed, the tragedy could have been avoided. The second one is the scandal of a cover-up, which started directly after the tragedy in order to protect those who were responsible. We saw this with the gravel that was thrown, and we just a few hours after the tragedy, and the fact that the government actually tried to avoid some of the investigations despite the European prosecutor being involved. We also saw it with the then minister. But unfortunately, I think that we're going to see this continue, maybe tomorrow as well, when Mr. Karamanlis is asked in the Parliament to answer for what happened. So there is a cycle of a cover-up, and the European Commission cannot be involved in this as well. 2 years on, the Greek railways continue to be unsafe. The Commission is responsible for protecting Greek peoples, not the government. So Greece must finally have a safe, modern rail network so that we don't have a repetition of the Tempe disaster. We need the railways that our people deserve. Thank you.
Latinopoulou.
I am delighted that you're finally having your show, because today we're hearing the truth. Well, only 20 minutes this show is going to last. 20 minutes, 10 of them went for the Commissioner. Well, do you see any European court in here? Well, no, because the European Parliament has no competence to do this type of thing. But basically, 57 people have been dead, and all we're hearing about is you. But yet we've heard the people coming along and saying that myself and my group are supporting New Democracy. Why? So that you can have this show for Avenitis Francos for 3 minutes. Shame on you, and double shame, because you are here talking about my country. You're joking about the Greeks. You're saying that the Commissioner has come along to give explanations, but you know very well that the Commissioner, as every Commissioner, has no competence whatsoever on issues being investigated by justice. So the people who are responsible, Stathmakis, Mitsotakis, Karamanlis, everyone who is responsible for these deaths should come to the European Parliament. Maybe they could have 10 minutes as well. Well, I'm afraid this is just a joke. So this Konstantopoulou has said nothing. Why? Why? We're talking about Tempi. We're going to hear from a Lithuanian, a German, and an Italian. And so, well, what are you trying to do? You're trying to build a political reputation over dead bodies. If the justice is not served to the families of the dead, I myself will bring them to Europe for the importance of the essence of all of this, the importance of the dead. My genuine condolences to the families.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Our next speaker is Mr. Frakos.
I don't have much time, and of course I won't have a chance to answer what you've just heard, but the families of the victims of Tempe right now are awaiting answers which will not come from the cover-up system in Greece, which is threatening people who go to justice. So, Commissioner, in terms of the accusations of cover-up, what is the position of the Commission? Because we've heard that there have been a cover-up at the pace of the crash. People covered up material as well, and 10 months on, the compartments were still there. But there are some important questions to be answered. Was there an infringement of the 2016 directive in Greece? What about the members of the oversight bodies, which are appointed by our ministries as well? Has the 2017 directive been infringed as well by particularly by the ministers involved here? What about the action plan? DG Reform apparently provided funding. Now, right now, the biggest question is, are trains in Greece safe? can you guarantee the safety of our citizens as Commissioner? You were aware of what had happened prior to the Tempe accident, but so why was nothing done? And also, what about the Hellenic Trains compliance certificates? What happens with those? I look forward to hearing your answers.
Speaker is Mr. Gozzi.
Thank you, President, dear Commissioner, dear colleagues. Tempi was not a simple accident. It was foreseeable. The warnings were there, the resources too. But the state failed to act, and 57 people lost their lives. Today, a second injustice adds to the first. The Greek government is trying to reduce this to a single mistake to avoid political responsibility. This is not justice. The families haven't forgotten. The fight for truth and justice is our fight, because Tempi is more than a national tragedy. It exposes deeper failures, a rule of law crisis, political pressures, violation of EU law. The European Commission has already opened a case against Greece for failing to guarantee basic railway safety. The Commissioner has just recalled it. So it is a European problem. It's not only a national problem. And even before the tragedy, the system was known to be failing because no one acted. And that goes beyond transport. Tempi is a symptom of something bigger, a situation where rule of law is eroded from within. Mrs. Vosenberg, you ask why we didn't discuss the train accident in Italy, for example. Because in that case, justice was done. And in this case, according to our information, the Greek Judges Association has openly and officially criticized the way the inquiry is conducted. Did or did not, Mrs. Vosenberg, the government cement the crime scene without any approval by the prosecutor? Did it happen or it didn't happen? This is the reality. This is why the European Commission must act. Dear Commissioner, you said safety is not negotiable. Truth is not negotiable either. Justice cannot wait. Silence is no longer an option. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Our next speaker is Mr. Sinkevicius.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, let me first express my deepest condolences to the families of the victims and remember those who lost their lives. This disaster is a clear reminder that safety on our railways must always come first. And we need to be transparent about what really went wrong and open about what's being done to fix it, to prevent it to happen in the future. People deserve to know how EU funds for transport are used and how safety is being improved. The EU has given significant funds for transport and infrastructure. And when public money does not lead to public safety, then political responsibility must follow. So let's make sure that strong, clear rules are in place and followed across every member state. Because the goal is simple: safer journeys and renewed trust. We call on the European Commission to be fully transparent, showing what was done before the disaster and what is being done now to protect lives, improve railway safety and ensure EU funds truly benefit the public.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Mr. Arvanitis is our next speaker.
Commissioner, colleagues, well, Commissioner, finally you've come to the European Parliament. The left worked really hard to have our request accepted, but I really wonder what the people who refused to accept our invitation wanted to protect you from. Now, I think that, Commissioner, the Commission was aware of everything that preceded the crime in Tempe. It knew and it didn't act as it should have done. The Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, the Prime Minister himself, but also DG Move have a great degree of responsibility. Since 2017, there's been an investigation into the critical non-existent contract between the Ministry and OSE. It took 6 years for Greece to reach the Court of Justice. After the accident in Tempe, the contract was hastily submitted in a panic. but the case was withdrawn without checking its compatibility with the 2012 directive. How can this be justified when DG Move itself is now raising objections to the content? In 2023, the ERA found that there was a clear lack of effective oversight on the Greek railways. But despite this, the Commission didn't initiate infringement proceedings until December 2024. Instead of exerting pressure, it not only applauded but also financed an action plan with no legal basis. I need an answer on this. So the national investigatory body operates with members appointed directly by the Ministry. Is that how the Commission understands the concept of operational independence? A finding was issued by the President, who had a legal relationship with the Railway Regulatory Authority. Was that conflict of interest examined? The accident site was cleared by government order and a large amount of critical evidence was destroyed. Commission was absent. A safety certificate was issued to Hellenic Trade by the ERA, a certificate subject to conditions. For the ERA and the Commission, can there be conditions on the protection of human life? And so as we speak here on Tuesday, the 17th of June, 2025, who is responsible for the safety of the Greek railways? The families of the 57 victims and an entire country are demanding truth. Your role is crucial.
President, ladies and gentlemen, the disaster in Tempe is something that hasn't been resolved. We've seen huge protests. There are questions that need to be sorted out and clarified. How can the police have been so slapdash in their approach? How can the transport minister who was responsible there, Karamanlis, resign, but then come back in the political arena soon after? The route between Thessaloniki and Athens was considered to be not up to scratch, and yet it was still being used. The European Public Prosecutor's Office was called into action, but nothing has happened, even though this tragedy happened more than 2 years ago. It's a European scandal. The ESN group demands a serious investigation and that those who are responsible are brought to justice. The people who died, the 57 of them, deserve that. We don't want to hear that it was some sort of an excuse like the economy's fault. Mr. Tsitsikostas needs to come up with a better answer to how the situation happened.
You have the floor to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished members of the European Parliament, I've listened very carefully to your input and your comments, and I want to continue to work together with you over the next few years so that never again do we have to experience this type of tragedy. Not in Greece, not anywhere in Europe. And for this, through our cooperation, but with the specific measures of action, we have to ensure the best possible conditions for the safety of European railways. I also think it's of huge importance that we clarify certain issues based on the questions which were put to me by members of this Parliament. Firstly, safety and the daily operations of railways are the exclusive competence of the member state and the national authorities and bodies. It's not the European Commission. What does the European Commission do? What's its competence? Basically, it creates the framework and provides technical assistance to member states when required for the safety of their railways and also, of course, for the implementation of European legislation. That is the clear distribution of competences on safety, as we see in the directive on the safety of railways. Secondly, the investigation into the disaster is the exclusive responsibility of the national authorities and justice, not of the European Commission. the European Commission does not investigate accidents. It does not comment on the findings of investigations conducted by other bodies. In Tempe, the investigation was conducted by the EODASAM, which is the national body responsible for investigating air and rail accidents. The report was approved and presented, but it's of the exclusive competence of that body. And, of course, there's also an investigation conducted from the legal point on the decision on the infringement of European legislation by Greece. Once again, we have that's the most decisive and the strongest instrument available to the Commission. So a decision was taken because we saw that there were ongoing systemic shortcomings, serious shortcomings in the operations of the Greek railways. So I can assure you once again, I know I'm repeating this, but it's important to me, that the European Commission conducts its competences to the letter. And if we notice that anything is going wrong, right there and then we will move to the next stage of the infringement proceedings under European legislation. Fourth point. It was referred beforehand to Directive 2016/798 on railway safety. National authorities may request support and technical support from the European body. That's true. Now, there was only advisory support towards the national body in Greece, which was granted beforehand. So that advised the consultancy which was given to EODASAM, the national body, was completed when in February 2025 the report was issued. The ERA is a decentralised body. The European Commission wasn't asked to provide an opinion for choosing the experts who provided the technical support. The ERA has also assessed Greece's progress, because I was asked about this one as well, about the implementation of the ERPMS, and called for an immediate improvement in the operation of the system so that the trains could run safely in my country. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament, to conclude, I would like to repeat once again that we are already working intensively, and after this tragic experience of Tempi, we will be making a proposal for a total review of the legislation which covers these issues. So I will call for very close cooperation between all of us on this very important step that we're going to be taking to further improve the safety of European railways, because this debate here today is being held for that purpose. How each and every one of us with our own competencies and responsibilities can do whatever it takes to ensure that the whole of Europe, the 27 member states, Greece as well, can have safe railways. Safety, ladies and gentlemen, is and must be, and I would agree with some of you who spoke, it is a common European good. It is and must be our absolute priority. None of our citizens, no passenger, must feel that they are running a risk because of shortcomings, flaws in the system. And that's the direction we are moving in. That is our priority, which is non-negotiable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Commissioner. The debate is closed. Pursuant to Rule 251(4) of the Rules of Procedure, I would like to inform you that there was no request to put to the vote the corregium announced in plenary of Monday, 16th June. The corregium is therefore deemed to have been approved, and it is published on the plenary web page. In relation to the recommendation for decision tabled by the Agri Committee to raise no objection to a delegated act, which was announced in plenary on Monday, 16th June, no objection was raised within the 24 hours deadline. Pursuant to Rule 114, paragraph 6, this recommendation is therefore deemed approved. It's published with the adopted text. In relation to the interpretations of Article 3, paragraph 5, first subparagraph, and Article 8 of Annex 2 Parliament's Rules of Procedure announced in plenary on Monday, 16th June, the President has not received any contestation within the 24 hours deadline pursuant to Rule 242, paragraph 4. The interpretations proposed by the AFCO Committee are therefore deemed approved. Next item on the agenda is Commission Statement, EU Framework Conditions for Competitive, Efficient and Sustainable Public Transport Services at all levels. As our first speaker has the floor, the Commissioner, Mr. Tsikostas.
Gracias, Presidente. Honourable members, thank you for placing public transport on today's agenda. Comprehensive, high-quality, affordable and accessible public transport, including rail, metro, buses and coaches, both in urban and rural areas, enable us to move today, and to do so in a sustainable way. It connects people to jobs, businesses, services, education and each other. The EU Urban Mobility Framework is very clear. Public transport is the backbone of sustainable urban mobility. It also employs 600,000 people across the European Union. So strengthening public transport means strengthening our economy and social cohesion. In most cases, public transport needs public support, while free market competition can help build effective networks. Public service obligations remain essential when market forces fall short. Let me be clear from the outset. Building the best possible public transport system is a shared effort, but the Member States are the ones in the driving seat. And I speak from personal experience. As a regional governor in northern Greece, I witnessed the long-awaited opening of Thessaloniki's first metro system. A truly transformative moment for the city and the citizens. And it was only made possible thanks to €1 billion of EU funding. At the same time, it was the close cooperation between regional, local and national government that brought it to life. And it was the Member State, Greece, that organised and financed services, not the European Union. And they did rightly so. Authorities closest to the citizens are best placed to assess demand, determine service levels and ensure quality and frequency. When the market alone cannot deliver the desired service, public service contracts and subsidies come into play. Local authorities must also decide the right mix of transport modes, supporting rural municipalities in identifying the best mobility solutions was the objective of the EU-funded SmarterNet project, which concluded at the end of 2024. The project identified and tested sustainable, reliable and affordable transport solutions in rural areas. The project delivered an extensive catalogue of rural mobility solutions, a set of training programmes for stakeholders, and produced practical tools and guidance documents such as on rural shared mobility solutions and on sustainable mobility in rural tourism regions. The project also established the first European rural mobility network, connecting over 70 rural municipalities from 14 EU countries, along with local authorities, practitioners, experts and network organisations. The Commission's role is to create the right framework and the conditions through clear and effective rules that make public transport services cost-efficient and fair for taxpayers. For example, the fourth railway package introduced competitive tendering for public rail contracts, as already applied, for example, in bus services. This does not mean lower quality, but quite the opposite. Service requirements are set ex ante by national or local authorities, nor does it threaten jobs. Social provisions protect employment conditions regardless of the service provider. EU rules allow generous subsidies for the purchase of green buses and rolling stock for public transport. Many Member States have used the recovery and resilience plans to renew and green their incumbent operations' ageing fleets. And we've also issued interpretative guidelines on public service contracts to give legal clarity and help with the implementation. Furthermore, the revised TEN-T regulation requires the EU's 431 largest cities to adopt sustainable urban mobility plans with public transport at their core. Quality services require adequate funding. Once again, this is primarily a Member State responsibility, but the Commission contributes to by supporting transport infrastructure projects through the Connecting Europe facility, the InvestEU guarantee programme and, of course, the Recovery and Resilience facility. Between 21 and 27, around €18 billion were foreseen for clean urban transport through the ERDF and Cohesion Fund, including €8.1 billion for public transport infrastructure. And we are also working closely with Executive Vice President Fitto on aligning with the EU Agenda for Cities. Now let me also highlight the Social Climate Fund, a very important programme, which will also help Member States develop and finance measures addressing transport poverty, so that nobody is left behind, no matter if you live in an urban, rural or remote area. This includes support for public transport, social leasing schemes, mobility wallets, discounted fares, shared mobility and on-demand services. Our recent guidance helps Member States identify priorities for this funding. The Commission's long-term vision for the EU's rural areas for 2040 calls on Member States and regions to develop sustainable rural mobility strategies. And this vision requires efforts to maintain and improve affordable public transport services. Honourable Members, looking ahead, we need to stay the course. The policy and legislative framework is already in place. Our task now is to implement, together with Member States, regions and cities. Thank you.
Evaristo, Mr. Tsikostas. On behalf of the EPP Group, our first speaker is Mr. Jonski.
Panie Przewodniczący, Panie Komisarzu.
Mr. President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, people across the world use public transport for different reasons. And the European Union is a global leader in accessible, affordable transport. I think in terms of technology and punctuality, we're falling behind Japan and South Korea, but we're well ahead of places like the United States, which are dominated by individual private transport. The European Union is a leader in public transport because it invests. It invests. In Poland alone, in the last few months, we have signed orders for 88 trams and more than 200 low-floor vehicles. We're investing in high-speed rail, and I want to thank the Commissioner for his commitment to that. We have to link all of Europe's capitals. Poland is ready to do that, and we have 7 years to invest 180 billion zloty in our railways. We have something like 410 million rail passengers in Poland per year, compared with 270 million just a few years ago. 40% of the Polish population live in rural areas where cars are not a luxury, they're a necessity, there is no choice. And promoting public transport should not go should be done by means of initiatives rather incentives rather than prohibitions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. On behalf of the S&D Group, Mr. Danielson.
Herr talman!
President, Commissioner, public transport is crucial so that people can live, work and lead sustainable lives across Europe. But it's going to require long-term investment and secure conditions for those who are driving our buses and trains. Around Europe today, we see a shortage of drivers at the same time as conditions are being squeezed, many of them because of European rules. For example, when you have tendering demands, then for every round of tendering, the conditions get slightly worse. At the same time, the EU's environmental laws are at stake. We're looking about a third of the emissions in the EU that's being caused here. It's going to be difficult to transition if we don't have the right approach. So, Commission, what are we doing? First of all, for the next long-term budget, and secondly, for forthcoming legislation to support public transport and everybody who works there. Europe needs a well-functioning, fair and sustainable transport system, so now we need to hear clear answers and action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Patriots, Mr. Haider.
Worüber reden wir hier?
So what are we actually talking about here? This point is only on the agenda to meet the socialist need to have more rules and more money. The money of other people. Their interest is well known for that. But we have to repair what's happening with individual transport first and foremost. But what's happening with air passengers, car drivers? Everything's more expensive, more rules, but nothing's improving. Nothing's getting better. There's no progress that apparently the EU is supposed to be bringing to its passengers. Even trams in Brussels run in the same way as they do in my home, but that's not up to the EU. It's national competence. Public transport should be regulated where it happens, certainly not a back room in the European Commission. So hands off, let's not build up further European democracy. That's enough. This demand for subsidies, more and more rules, that's brought us where we are right now. So please, just stop it.
On behalf of the ECR Group, Vice President Sverna.
President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, according to Eurostat, 1 European in three live in urban areas densely populated. Others live in rural areas and less populated areas. So we're looking at the whole of the European Union here that needs to be covered. It's very difficult to do that because you have small local authorities have difficulty in having those sort of connections. But there has to be a specific ability to move around, to have transport. You have public service and obligations, and the legislation brought in 2023 brings in rules about not just having economic criteria for tendering. However, to make these public service transportation obligations possible, we have to have other norms as well. There need to be minimum standards for urban transport, interurban transport as well. But social aspects are important too. In financial terms, there's a question of the money that's set aside for this. And if you're having multi-level governance between the European Union and the member states, this needs to be integrated, and you need to bring on board the small local authorities as well, especially if they're in internal locations in their states. So we need to have fair mobility, and that needs to be done with the territories concerned, not just for them. So we need to have inclusion, we need to have freedom. Thank you.
Grazie, Vicepresidenta. Our next speaker on behalf of the Renew Group, Mr. Olchen.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, verehrte.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioner, colleagues. Obviously, public transport is a good way of getting people from A to B, especially for commuters. And it's important to look at how public transport systems work. I think it's good that the European Union is supporting public transport infrastructure and its modernization. But I think what would constitute true progress and would be a real benefit from EU intervention would be if we had integrated ticketing and multimodal transport. There's plenty of scope to develop there. Because what we're seeing is people going by car to the station and then taking the train. Ideally, they should be able to get to the station by comfortable public transport and so not need the car. I hope we'll be seeing a proposal from the Commission so that we can simplify ticketing so that it's going to be one click on the mobile phone in an app to enable passengers to start their journey, regardless of what forms of transport they use during that journey. I think that would constitute a huge step forward for public transport in Europe.
On behalf of the Greens, Madame Schilling.
Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, I'd like to start on a personal note because the question of transport is a personal one. As a child, my mum took me by tram to the kindergarten. I got on the bus to go to school. I got the underground to come to my university, and today I travel around a lot. So good, affordable, reliable public transport constitutes freedom. Freedom of moving around in public space without having to afford a car. And that freedom, if in order to exist, we have to have cooperation with other people, including at local levels, but we have to assume our own responsibility. And yes, we're going to have to pay for that. That applies to the MFF and the Cohesion Fund. We need to think about how urban plans can be made so they're on a human dimension, but we have to make sure as well that the transport sector is arranged in such a way that people can work there sustainably. And I can agree with colleagues as well that we need to simplify transport. We need to simplify it to allow people to get from A to B, but also when it comes to ticketing as well. All in all, public transport is a question of freedom, and that's something we need to take damn seriously.
Much, dear colleague, on behalf of the left, Madame Kundura.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. President, Commissioner. Public transport is a crucial pillar for us to reduce greenhouse gases from transport and achieve our aims for a climate-neutral Europe. But Obviously, to achieve that, we have to ensure that transport is also safe, accessible, modern, and affordable for everyone, particularly for the weakest groups in society. So we need safe, accessible public transport. Very few. We need access for all citizens to urban transport and multimodal solutions as well. We need more incentives for our citizens, professionals first and foremost, to leave behind their pollution-producing cars and to use public transport. So we need a clear commitment that under the new MFF there will be enough funds for public transport to ensure that there is adequate investment for the modernisation of networks and also overall improvements of work and projects within the transport sector. Thank you.
ESN Group, Mr. Ulrich.
People in Slovakia have told me to let you know that they've had enough of Greta Thunberg and her silly ideas and you and your prohibitions. I'm a normal man. I like cars, tractors, sport cars, the smell of petrol. And I'm alarmed by the hypocrisy here. You talk about the need for public transport. You don't want people to be able to choose their cars at will. And yet von der Leyen travels by plane a distance of, 40 kilometers or something. And you don't mind. We too support public transport. We're not against electric mobility, but people should have the right to choose, and people should have the right to choose their own car. So you have to do away with this ban on the internal combustion engine.
We jump now into the second part of the debate, and our first speaker is Madam Camberry. You have the floor.
Thank you, President, Commissioner. The Trans-European Transport Network has gone a long way to connecting the heart of Europe to its peripheries, be it Ireland, Malta, Cyprus or Greece. But this backbone of European connectivity is a project that is not yet complete. We often talk about the single market for free movement of goods, services and people, but the single market for transport remains an unfinished patchwork. As we continue to work on the implementation of the TEN-T corridors, we must also keep in mind those peripheral regions, as well as rural transport. And so, an integrated single transport market must work for all Europeans, urban and rural alike. That's why I welcome the focus in your mission letter, Commissioner, on the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. And what we need now is a clear set of guidelines, principles to help us work towards decarbonisation of our transport networks, be it rail, road, sea or air. In Ireland, I want to note the major progress is underway and plans are in the works, from Navan rail line, the DART Plus expansion to investments in sustainable aviation fuel hubs at Dublin Airport. And so my final message to you is to push for a strengthened Connecting Europe facility within the next MFF, to ensure that Europe puts its money where its mouth is, to decarbonise more quickly and to enhance connectivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Next speaker, Mr. Kalfon. You have the floor.
Mes chers collègues,
ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner, the EU has managed to reduce its emissions by 37%, but we've seen an increase from 2010, and it's going to be 44% of emissions from transport because of personal cars, which is 86% of the distance covered by transport. So this explains what's happening about roads, but what about the long term? We need to develop railways, we need to look at cross-border regions as well. We need to look at the daily transport where this emission kicks in. 99% of the journeys are made there. About 75% of Europeans live in urban areas. It'll be 84% soon. To deal with these challenges, 26 projects of local and regional trains are being proposed, and that would require 18 to 20 million euros. You'd have to increase the EU budget up to 100 billion euros to be able to cover that. So, colleagues, if we don't change anything, then carbon neutrality by 2050, that will never be achieved. Thank you.
Colleague, our next speaker is Madame Biksek.
Commissioner, I will speak in Hungarian. Ha a közlekedést fenntarthatóvá akarjuk tenni, a különböző
If we want to have sustainable public transport, we need to support environmentally friendly forms of transport. Public transport use in Hungary is higher than the EU average. Hungary has affordable, environmentally friendly public transport, and the Hungarian government is improving public transport links. The Hungarian minorities in neighbouring countries are also being helped, for example, by improvements to the Budapest-Belgrade rail link. Hungary is committed to sustainable mobility, and that is reflected in the new system introduced in the capital, Budapest. And this is good news for the environment. Mr. Złotowski.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, well-organized public transport is the way for people to get to school, to work, to the doctor safely. This is the way to deal with transport exclusion, which is a serious problem in many European regions. That means investing in road and rail infrastructure. We have European rail vehicle manufacturers, not least in my own hometown of Bydgoszcz, where they manufacture railway carriages and trams. In the new multi-annual financial framework, there should be resources for local authorities and regions which want to invest in public transport and public transport vehicles and infrastructure made in Europe. For that, we should be supporting our own industry.
You have the floor.
Commissioner, President, if we want public transport to be a realistic option for people, then it needs to be an efficient and appealing option. We need a high-quality transport system which is reasonably priced and accessible. Passengers who took the intercity train this morning from Cork to Dublin spent 2 hours and 39 minutes on the train, but it would have taken the same time to travel by car. Earlier this year, I referred to statistics that showed the train to Dublin is often late. In January 2024, for 20 out of 26 journeys, the train was late. Public transport needs to be cheaper than other options and on time, not some of the time, all of the time. It needs to be comfortable with a functioning internet connection on board. Again, not some of the time, not most of the time, but all of the time. This is why we need a European framework to expedite infrastructural investment so people will willingly opt for public transport over their cars. Thank you very much.
Rail is the backbone of public transport in Europe, or at least it should be. But as long as buying train tickets feels like navigating through a maze, rail will struggle to compete. And as long as passengers do not enjoy full passenger rights protection, people will not trust rail. Not because it's slow, but because it's hard to access. The upcoming initiatives on rail ticketing must finally deliver. One journey, one ticket, no excuses. We need open data, fair and clear rules, and a level playing field for all operators and platforms, public and private. Passengers should not need 5 apps and a PhD to book a train. Let's get away from rail being the most frustrating mode of transport. Let's make rail the easiest way to travel.
Thank you, dear colleague. Mr. Papadakis, you have the floor.
Συζήτηση για τις δημόσιες.
So if we debate public transport in Greece, we have to debate Tempe as well. Strange that 2.5 years on, it's the first time that we're debating that here as well. But there's been a cover-up from the New Democracy government. Officially, the Commission thinks it's a disastrous accident, but it was a crime. Basically, there has been a lack of implementation in safety in the name of competition. We heard about that from the Commissioner. And so we've seen that that's led to Tempe. And obviously the European Union, people at home are travelling around, but there are carriages which need to be updated or should go to scrap, as we've heard. We need some answers on that. It's only through a massive organised fight from the people together throughout the European Union that there are penalties applied to all of the governments who have gone along with all of this. Only with that will we actually achieve our aims.
Nuestra siguiente oradora es la diputada Nevado del Campo.
Querido presidente, querido.
Yes, Commissioner. Today we're speaking about framework conditions for public and sustainable public transport in the European Union. But allow me to speak about the reality a little bit with the wonderful example of Extremadura, where I come from in Spain, where there's a terrible absence of all of this. It takes 12 hours to get to certain parts of Extremadura from one to the... So how can we speak about sustainability and efficiency in certain regions where there is no train connection whatsoever and no safety, furthermore? We ought to oblige national governments to come to terms with this situation and to really take measures in order to deal with these particular lacunae that exist in the transport system. And, of course, we can't allow for further delay on this front. In 2010, promises were issued. And, of course, millions of Europeans have been affected by this. Extremadura is not asking for privileges. It wants a dignified, if you like, transport system, allowing for connections to different areas, of course. Madrid, Paris are wonderful examples, but what we have in these particular provinces is certainly not sustainable, and it isn't efficient either. And we really don't want any more of these promises which are not met. Of course, some will say, of course, that the European Union ought not touch our national infrastructure. Thank you.
La tribuna es ahora para la señora Serrano Sierra.
Thank you very much, Ms. Serrano Sierra.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. Public transport is not just about mobility. It is also a tool for equality, for cohesion and for social justice. In Spain, buses account for 60% of passenger journeys, public passenger journeys. It connects cities and villages, and it also guarantees the right to transport for everyone, wherever they live. We have a working model. We have a model which is accessible, high quality and stable, with reasonable prices and with public-private cooperation, which works very well. I think Europe should have a look at this model as an example. And in fact, the European Commission does recognise in its 2024 report that the policy of promoting public transport in Spain is an example when it comes to guaranteeing that people can access transport. So the European framework should strengthen systems such as ours, which guarantee territorial cohesion. And there are financial instruments, such as a social climate fund, which should serve to fund public transport, because it is a key tool when it comes to achieving sustainable, affordable and efficient mobility. We want affordable mobility, which is high quality. And this is a matter of equality, and equality is the basis of our European project.
Serrano Sierra.
Thank you, Ms. Serrano Sierra.
Mr. Leonardelli. Monsieur Leonardelli.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, for years now, the Commission has said that they're going to come and do something for public transport, but for our citizens, particularly those in France, the reality is that they feel abandoned. In cities, projects are massively delayed, and in the countryside, there's nothing. 10 million French citizens do not have any access to public transport. French people living in rural areas have no choice but to take the car and to pay more, while Brussels subsidises environmental lobbies. And let's talk about this. These radical environmentalists are not just activists. They're trying to block projects such as the 69 in Occitania in my country. These are extremists who attack work areas with Molotov cocktails and endanger human lives. And we see complicity with them. The Commission doesn't work for the common good. They work for a militant, radical minority. The Patriots, the Rassemblement National, Jordan Bardella, we want to have modern, affordable public transport everywhere for everyone, regardless of whether you are retired, student or working. And above all, we want to avoid disconnected liberal ideologies and ecology at all costs. Thank you.
Mr. Magyar, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. There is a saying that the wealth of a nation becomes obvious not when poor people can own a car, but when even rich people travel by train. Hungarians are baffled by the fact that the EU spends loads of money on developing rail travel, and under Orbán's government, time has not only come to a standstill, it is now in full reverse. The rail network has fallen apart. Can you imagine that the Orbán government is blaming TISA for all of this, when everybody knows that funds are not available because they have been suspended because of the corruption of Orbán's regime. And Orbán's luxury-loving transport secretary stopped all development projects 3 years ago. All of them. Rolling stocks are 40 years old on average. Delays, if you add them up, were 7 years last year. It is not just that air conditioning does not work in trains and hospitals. It doesn't. Even the toilets don't work. Orbán promises to modernize rail travel, but buys 30-year-old leases 30-year-old rolling stock. But this time he's wrong, because Hungarians will take their country back, and TISA will start modernizing the network. Thank you.
You have a blue card from Madame Bisek from Patriots. Do you accept it?
Yes.
Bisek, you have the. Madame Bisek, you have the
Thank
floor
you,
for
Chair.
30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you. Képviselő úr.
Honourable Member, you are again speaking ill of your country, and will use this opportunity, the blue card, to get another 1 minute to speak ill of your country. We've seen that before. Momentum, the Socialists, the Democratic Coalition did this, but I think you are actually overdoing this. Aren't you ashamed? Honourable member, I think you're confusing your country with Prime Minister Orban. Orban is not Hungary. You've been lying for a minute in your question, but you're not saying why there are no funds available for Hungary. Everybody knows that your boss and his industrial-scale corruption is responsible for the suspended funds. Tens of thousands of people were left stranded in railway stations in the heat. The Minister of Transport lives in a luxury castle. Why don't you address issues like this? We have trains that go whose maximum speed is 10 kilometers per hour. A century ago, it was 40.
Our next speaker, Señor Gonçalves.
Senhor Presidente, Senhor Comissário, garantir
President, Commissioner, ensuring truly competitive, efficient and sustainable public transport is essential to achieve the Union's climate objectives and also to promote territorial cohesion. Investing in public transport means investing in a fairer, greener Europe, which makes a difference to citizens. But there can be no one-size-fits-all approach. We need positive discrimination for the most sensitive areas, whether it is rural areas or outermost regions, places where public transport is infrequent, poor quality or non-existent. It is vital that we should have public funds to provide sea and air connections for island populations. This is vital for transport and supply to those areas, but also to maintain vital sectors such as tourism, which those small economies may depend on. So, Commissioner, it's important that the next MFF should take into account the specific needs of regions and that it should channel investments where they are needed most.
You have a blue card from Mr. Oliveira from the left. Do you accept it?
Yes.
Mr. Oliveira, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. Now, you mentioned the good intentions of the transport policy, but the debate that we are carrying out here is based on a communication which is about public transport based on an approach about competitiveness and efficiency and not really the needs that people have. And this is what guarantees the funding for European transport networks. What it doesn't mean is that you can really support local transport. That is the criterion, which means that we don't have transport when it comes to autonomous regions. This is what stands in the way of more frequent public transport services, for example. And instead of that, people are packed in like sardines, and we don't even talk about the rights of workers in the transport sector. So how can you ensure that we also meet the needs of people and their rights to mobility, given the criteria based on competitiveness and efficiency? Mr. Gonçalves, thank you. Well, what I'm calling for is positive discrimination. That's the point for the outermost regions, for example, such as my region, Madeira, Azores, and also other regions in other member states of the EU. We should have positive discrimination so that we can support the most vulnerable populations, people in regions where there are small-scale economies, people who have particular difficulties when it comes to facing up to the costs of the energy transition, for example. This should mean that we have regular, affordable public transport at a competitive cost, and it should also mean that those people can benefit from that mobility. That is why we are having this debate.
Is Señor Umberto.
Caro Presidente, caro Comissário e amigo.
President, Commissioner and friend, colleagues, I am from a country which knows very much about public investment. Investments for efficient and sustainable public transport. There's no question about that. And we know what the difficulties are, where the bottlenecks exist in provinces in rural areas which are not well hooked up to the central network. We have to achieve balance and equality, and we have to support mobility. We have to support mobility in all forms, and that has to be of a low CO2 emission nature as well. Low emission targets, those for 2030, are to be supported. We feel that we need an alternative form of mobility for rural areas and for urban areas as well. Now, in Portugal, my friends, we're in favor of competitive, resilient public transport. Great responsibility exists. We understand the importance of this for the European Union, which here wants to play a leading role, and we're aware of the difficulties that exist and the challenges. For that reason, we propose specific practical solutions so that we can come closer to this particular reality. Colleague, you have a blue card from Mr. Oliveira from the left. Mr. Umberto, a very important aspect of public transport is assessment of the workers, of their career paths, of their ability to work in an effective fashion and dignified fashion at work. Now, be that on roads, railroads, navigation, at sea, and in the air. There is great dissatisfaction in our country on the part of workers because of the terrible working conditions, particularly in the rail sector. What sort of proposals do you have to deal with this? Now, the assessment is extremely important. Look, Mr. Oliveira, the government that I'm supporting in Portugal has done much more on this particular front than previous governments for workers, much more than Russia has done for its workers or the North Korea has done for its workers. We're step by step, we're moving in a consistent fashion, and we're offering to the different regions a better quality of life. This is the particular course that we're following, and we follow it with the support of the European Union. And of course, Portugal is dedicated to achieving these particular targets. Thank you.
Thank you. I will speak Italian. Il trasporto pubblico.
Public transport is much more than a service. It's the pillar of economic development, social cohesion, and green transition in Europe. Ensuring accessible, reliable, quality transport is not a luxury. It's a fundamental right for all citizens, regardless of where they live or their incomes. Currently, a lot of peripheral rural areas, for example, where I come from, Marche, which has the least financing in Italy, mobility is an obstacle rather than a resource. There aren't enough links, and wait times are too long. Services are not very reliable. This is territorial inequality, and it undermines our social fabric, as well as holding back local development. We have to act now. We need an ambitious European plan which puts the right to the mobility at its heart. We need to have investment in transport services, regional, interregional train transport, structural work, and link up the internal of the country and coastal areas as well.
Burnett.
Predsjedniče, povjereniče.
Affordable, high-quality, sustainable, integrated public transport. That is the basis for both mobility of citizens and our climate goals. And this goes especially for states like Croatia, which also have islands. I want to emphasize the importance of integrated public transport, because merely connected various modalities is not enough. We have to offer to our citizens a real alternative to car transport. Unfortunately, our capital, Zagreb, currently has no vision and has taken no steps towards establishing such a system. We don't have an integrated model. We don't have a single ticket. We don't have intermodal hubs. We have not integrated our various railways. And railways are the key. Zagreb does not need superficial measures. Zagreb needs an integrated network of public transport. That is why I definitely support the European framework that will offer its member states stable financing, among other sources, through funds connected to the cohesion policy. Public transport has to be affordable for everybody. But we also have to enable flexible model of services, including public-private partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleague. Our next speaker is Madame Doherty. You have the floor.
Commissioner, for too many Europeans, major public transport development can sometimes feel like being stuck in one big traffic jam, frustrating, never making any progress, and that's before we ever even talk about the increasing costs. And that's honestly the case when it comes to Metrolink in Dublin. For literally my entire adult life, we have been talking about building a metro for Dublin North, especially to and from our airport, and then maybe on to other parts of the city, the south and the west. And all of this time, the much-vaunted plans have been delayed and adjusted with no measurable progress. So now we're talking about a start date of 2028 and an estimated cost of between 7 billion and 12 billion euros. Now, I don't know any other project that would come in with an estimated 5 billion euro price range. Metrolink in Dublin will no doubt bring about immeasurable benefits, both economically and, more importantly, to the people, the quality of the people's lives that I represent. But we need to get the shovels in the ground, and we need to get the EU, through the Connecting Europe facility, to play its part in financing this project. As the only major EU capital city without a rail link to the airport, Metrolink would see a major EU transport priority under the forthcoming Sustainable Transport Investment Plan. It's vital for businesses, it's vital for citizens, and it's an efficient and sustainable public transport system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Doherty. Thank you very much, Madam Doherty. I have 5 requests for Catch the Eye, and I'm going to accept all of them. First speaker, Mr. Tikkanen from seat 210.
Arvoisa puhemies, julkinen liikenne on paikallinen.
President, our public transport is a local issue that should not be controlled at the EU level. For example, you cannot use the same solutions for moving around in the freezing temperatures of Lapland as you can in Brussels. The Helsinki Metro, Turku's island transport, or dispersely populated areas in Kainuu require completely different systems. That is why citizens elect their municipal leaders, so that they can decide which vehicles to use and how to get around. Local people know their own area best. Our EU officials should not dictate what is best for a region they have never even visited. Too many decisions from the EU bring more bureaucracy to the local level, but not better service. I do not think it is sensible for us to discuss public transport services here in the European Parliament at all. Public transport should be decided locally, full stop.
Okay. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Nikolaou Alafnos.
The European Union strategic project for Greece is something that, well, it goes without saying for Greece. After the terrible catastrophe, rail catastrophe at Tempi, when 2 railroads, 2 engines collided with one another. And we've seen, of course, all of this and the terrible political storm that has come out of it. Now, the implementation of policy, we have to understand that it involves assuming responsibilities. In this instance, after this terrible accident, we have to understand that it would lead to certain questions regarding the group that provided the particular machinery that was involved in this particular accident. And we've had a terrible discussion, a totally fragmented and half amputated discussion, I would say, about this in an effort to basically cover up the reality. The lack of responsibility having been taken for this particular catastrophe. is an ongoing crime, and we, of course, condemn this from the Communist Party of Greece. Thank you.
Madam Zakaria from seat 846.
Mr. Tsitsikostas, public transport in a country like Greece, which has privatized everything, it's a good target, I have to say, but we're speaking about competitive and sustainable public transport when the basic thing is the security and safety of workers and of passengers. But you see that the EPP and its particular approach didn't really catch on what they had to say, and with those 4 MEPs, we sort of slid onto the next topic, that of Tempi. After 2 years of that terrible rail accident, 57 dead and no responses. There hasn't been a proper analysis of the train engines that were involved in those particular, in that particular catastrophe. There's been a clear cover-up. The government is intervening in the court procedure and in the legal process overall concerning this. Nobody is taking responsibility. The same thing is taking place at sea and in the air. Investors try to reduce costs, and at the same time they're reducing security and safety. People are paying with their lives for this. This is shameful for Greece. This is shameful for the European Union as well, and it ought to change. Thank you.
You are my last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Dear people of Europe, I would like to touch on 2 things. One colleague said he likes the smell of petrol like a normal man. To this, I would just advise to not spend too much time next to the exhaustion of a car. Another colleague said that he wants to regulate public transport there where it happens. Therefore, I think that means not on the EU level. I would advise this colleague to think how he travels from his home country. We use trains, and also even a plane can be public transport at some point. I think there is a huge interest in cross-border transport in the European Union. So when someone asks where does public transport happen, it happens Europe-wide. Thank you very much. Mr. Vice President, I would also like to use this opportunity to apologize because in the last plenary I had a misunderstanding within the rules of procedure. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. It's first time for me in my life in a political assembly. Thank you. From my heart. Mr. Commissioner, you can close the debate.
Gracias, Presidente. Well,
let me say, first of all, thank you, President. Now, it was wonderful that you could talk about something that we talked about earlier on, a very serious issue indeed. It's unfortunate you couldn't take the floor during that particular debate, but it's important to have heard what you had to say. Your view was important to us.
Thank you for your comments and for your your high interest in public transport, which indeed is the backbone of sustainable mobility. Now, I believe that we have a solid policy and a regulatory base to ensure urban mobility and public transport receive the attention and the support that they deserve. For me, the priority going forward is to ensure that we are really making the most out of the resources that we have available to us to improve public transport, in particularly the Recovery and Resilience Facility and, as I said earlier, the Social Climate Fund, which is a great opportunity. Dear European Parliament members, we cannot allow this transition to happen if we are not, all of us, on board. And we have to take care of the people who do not have the means to follow this transition. And it is also important to ensure that adequate levels of investments and funding are available for transport in the next MFF. However, I would like to close with some of my priorities on the subject. Ensuring effective rollout of the revised Tempi regulation, supporting Member States in implementing the Social Climate Fund and tackling the labour and skills shortage in transport, which, honourable members, has reached unprecedented levels. And I would like to say something here. Let me be clear. We cannot build a strong public transport without people to run it. Yet, only 21% of the public and EU's public transport workforce today are women. And the numbers drop even further in certain roles. Only 5% of train drivers are women today. These are not just statistics. They represent missed opportunities for women and for the sector, especially now when staff shortages are becoming an even bigger problem. In 2017, the Commission launched the Women in Transport EU Platform for Change. It provides a space for sharing best practices, and it has just published 25 recommendations to help attract, recruit and retain women in the transport sector. And I want you to know that I will work very hard on this aspect. We also support the Diversity Ambassadors in Transport Network, which brings forward voices from across the workforce and the user community. But we must go further. We need to attract young people for careers in transport. That is why I am glad that we will organise a conference in October with young people to listen and learn from them and from their expectations and concerns related to transport jobs. It is very important, honourable members, to attract young people back to the transport sector. Just to name one example, today Europe has a lack of 500,000 truck drivers. Can you imagine what this means for the single market, for free commerce, for our unity and our economic development? So I'm willing, with you, of course, to work very hard in this direction. Now, the future of public transport depends on how successfully we recruit, train and retain a more diverse and talented workforce, not just because it's fair, but because diversity enhances safety, resilience and innovation. So thank you again for this very, very interesting and important debate tonight, and I'm looking forward to the continuation of our close collaboration in the midst especially of the TRAN committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. Please remain in your seats. We are going to hold a 2-minute break and we will continue.
Ja, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, wir machen weiter mit.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we can continue with our meeting, and the next item on the agenda is the Council and Commission statements on the latest developments on the revision of the air passenger rights and airline liability regulations. I'd like to start by giving the floor on behalf of the Council to the Minister for the European Union, Adam Slapka.
5 Minuten, bitte.
For 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Mr. Commissioner, honourable members. On behalf of the Council, this file, 6 presidencies have tried to find an agreement on the revision of the regulation on air passengers' rights without success. It was high time to have these rules updated for several reasons. Passengers need clear and simple rules to better use their rights. Authorities need rules that are easy to apply to reduce legal disputes, and airlines want more realistic rules that reflect how they operate and help ensure connectivity. The Polish presidency has been committed to moving this revision forward. On 5 June 2025, the Council reached a political agreement. The Council position refers to a wide spectrum of passengers' rights. I will name a few. It prevents last-minute cancellation for purely commercial reasons. It prevents denied boarding in case of a no-show. It encourages airlines to get passengers to their destination quickly and give proper help when needed, thanks to a new incentives. The delay compensation threshold of 4 and 6 hours ensure equal treatment of passengers within the internal market. At the same time, they give the air carriers the minimum operational flexibility that is necessary to maintain their flights. Madam President, honourable members, Mr. Commissioner, in line with the spirit of the Commission proposal, the outcome of discussion within the Council strikes a balance between strong passengers' protection and level playing field within our internal market for the aviation sector. Once the Council position is transmitted to the Parliament, it will be up to the co-legislators to enter into negotiations. The second reading procedure means the revision can be adopted in 2026. I'm sure that both institutions share the goal of delivering effective and clear legislation for the benefit of both citizens and the aviation community. Throughout this process, the Council will remain fully committed to the principles of mutual sincere cooperation, transparency, accountability and efficiency. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Herr Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'd now like to give the floor, again for 5 minutes, to the Commissioner, Apostolos Tzitzikostas.
Thank you, Madam President, honourable members of the European Parliament. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to the President and all the members for placing the revision of air passenger rights rules on today's agenda. It is a very, very important moment. The 5th of June marked a significant milestone for this file, just as we heard from the Council earlier, as the Council reached a political agreement, the result of a long, laborious deliberations and wide-ranging views. As you know, the long-awaited review of the EU air passenger rights regulations was launched by the European Commission back in 2013. The aim has always been clear: to strengthen the protection of passengers while also taking into account the evolving needs of the aviation sector. This means ensuring more accessible complaint mechanism, improving digital access and enhancing transparency so that all passengers know their rights and can exercise them with confidence. The European Parliament acted promptly, adopting its position following a first reading in 2014. Your prompt reaction and commitment laid the groundwork for crucial improvements in the protecting and respecting of passenger rights. Now the Council has finally adopted its position, and this is good news. And the compromise text improves passenger rights on information, assistance, protection in case of various disruptions, such as cancellation, delays, denied boarding, and tarmac delays. Importantly, it guarantees that passengers with disabilities or reduced mobility receive full compensation when their mobility equipment is damaged or destroyed, which of course was not the case so far. And for the first time, recognised assistant dogs are granted further protection against injury. I believe that the Council's political agreement represents a fair balance among diverse Member States' perspectives and opens the door for negotiations with the European Parliament. And of course now it is the time that we can do even more for passenger rights through our discussions that we will have, the Council, the Commission and the European Parliament, in the months that are following. And of course I'm confident that these negotiations will lead to a breakthrough, and I call on this House to engage into constructive negotiations with the Council. After all, this reform has a direct, tangible, positive impact on the daily lives of European citizens, especially those with disabilities and those with reduced mobility. And we have already waited for 12 years. This is far too long. We now share a great responsibility to define and improve legal framework for consumers, and the result must be balanced, simple and very clear, so that it can be easily and effectively applied for the benefit of both passengers and the aviation industry. Crucially, it is fundamental that the co-legislators consider ways to further strengthen the enforcement of these new rules. This will ensure that rules are applied effectively across all Member States, making passenger rights truly viable and meaningful. Here, I very much count on the support of the European Parliament, because your constructive work and support for the 2023 proposal on enforcing passenger rights in the Union is already a strong and welcome signal. It is a step for more effective and efficient implementation to all Member States, and most importantly, for rebuilding and reinforcing passenger confidence. And I want to say something. Maybe you, or even me, would like something better when it comes, for example, to the time for compensation after a delay. We have ahead of us the discussion, and we can make this happen. This is, after all, why, after the Council decision, which was a breakthrough, because otherwise, if we didn't reach this decision, we would not be able to discuss and reopen this file, we have the chance to discuss everything and see which aspects of this new passengers' rights needs to be revised even further. So in my view, it is really a strong and welcome signal. It is a step for a more effective and efficient implementation. So let me close by taking this opportunity to reiterate my absolute commitment to working closely with you to further advance EU passenger rights, to ensure that they evolve to become fit for the new realities of modern mobility and aligned with the expectations of citizens. I know that you too are equally committed to this goal, and I'm looking forward to the discussions that we have ahead of us in the trilaterals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we come to the first round of speakers on behalf of the political groups. And first, for EPP, Andrei Novakov.
Госпожо председател, Kyrie Tsikostas.
Madam Chair, Mr. Tsikostas, colleagues, I believe that the new proposals has a key purpose, not to make things worse than they are at the moment. I have taken part in many legislative procedures, but this is the first one which makes me breathless. First, because we had to find a balance between the rights of passengers and saving aviation in Europe. If your flight is delayed by 3 hours, you are entitled to compensation. Now they say that this period has to be increased to 4 hours. So I suggest those who support this to accompany me to any EU airport to wait with me 4 hours while being delayed in attending his child's birthday or another key event. Therefore, this should be a red line. We should not increase the period above which compensation is to be paid. We are talking about 1 trillion. 2 million people are engaged in the aviation sector. We cannot ask of them to work miracles. Therefore, in closing, I would say, colleagues, if someone proposes to use something free of charge, you should bear in mind that probably the product is you. Thank you.
Speaker on behalf of S&D is Matteo Ricci.
Thank you, President. Dopo oltre 10 anni il Consiglio.
After more than 10 years, the Council finally adopted a position on the revision of the passenger rights and airline liability regulations. But that's not the end of it. The adopted text is very far away from the text that we're working on air passenger rights in the Parliament, in the TRAN Committee. And this text calls into question a fundamental right, which is compensation for delays above 3 hours. Increasing the threshold to 4 hours risks significantly weakening passenger rights protections. And also, it's 60% less in terms of compensation. Our group can't support this. What we would like is for the solution to come through more effective mechanisms under national authorities, and which will ensure that airlines informs passengers upstream about their right to receive compensation. Furthermore, the court has said that hand luggage of a reasonable size and weight should be allowed in the cabin. And the S&D would support this to see further protections for passenger rights.
The colleagues to keep the time, as we will not finish all the debates that are planned for this evening when everyone is taking more time than foreseen. The next speaker is Roman Haider. Herr Haider, Sie haben das Wort für 1 Minute 30.
For 1 minute, Mr. Haider, 1 minute 30. So 12 long years, the EU has not introduced new air passenger rights. And now suddenly we have this particular regulation which actually creates a worse situation than BR. Rather than 3 hours of delay, it's now 4 hours to receive any sort of compensation, backstepping, in other words, for consumers, for passengers, for their protection. It's a terrible deal, of course, between the European Union Commission and the airline industry. The airline industry will make billions as far as savings with this lower compensation which is provided. And also sustainable aircraft fuel is more expensive, and it isn't even effective at all. And of course, it has huge costs for the industry, for passengers, for everybody. And now we have this particular declaration from the airline industry, which presents everything in a wonderful fashion, which doesn't correspond to any reality whatsoever. So I do think that this whole thing is very embarrassing, Commissioner. And And, of course, all of this is supported by Madam von der Leyen, this trumpeted new Green Deal, scandalous in nature, which will be paid for by European consumers, by all the citizens, men and women of this continent.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin. Szanowni Panie.
Commissioner, the Polish presidency, represented by Minister Dariusz Klimczak, announced a great success. We finally have a compromise in terms of passenger rights. And what is the compromise about? Airlines will be able to impose additional fees for hand luggage, and that goes against the judgments of the Court of Justice, while passengers will only be entitled to compensation after 4 hours and not after 3 hours, as it is the case now. Well, that truly is a great success. It's just a pity that it's not a success from the perspective of the passengers. However, I am not surprised that the minister is proud of himself. A few days ago, he announced his priority, which is the plan to create a wintertime railway connection from Poland to Austria and Italy. He seems to have forgotten that his main objective is to combat transport exclusion throughout the country and not just caring about winter holidays in the Alps for the elites. Fortunately, the text that we're working on in the Parliament will truly improve the position of passengers in transport. My amendments will guarantee hand luggage in the price of the ticket. There will be a simplification and speeding up of the procedures related to the compensation for delays. And travelling children will be granted a special category of a special passenger, which will mean that the airlines will be forbidden to impose fees for a seat next to their guardian, their caretaker. We still have a few votes to go, some negotiations, and we will reach a real compromise.
Vertretend für die Fraktion der Renew.
Thank you very much, President, colleagues. For 12 years, Member States waited before responding to what the Commission had proposed in 2013. And what's come out of this? Instead of strengthening passenger rights, they have been weakened. And instead of a 3-hour delay for a European flight leading to compensation, in the future it would be only after 4 hours that you get compensation. Now, colleagues, this attack on passenger rights is something that we here in the Parliament will not go along with. That is very clear. And all of this is also connected with this trick. It's the first time that we've had a first reading position of this kind in the Council, and therefore not given the Parliament much room for manoeuvre in terms of how we respond to this proposal. So let's have a look at the situation when it comes to passengers. Where are the problems? The problems are that nowadays there are some airlines, not all, but some airlines that hide how you're supposed to get your compensation. We have problems with hand luggage. And instead of dealing with these problems, you're weakening passenger rights. And I think we should be doing the opposite in the Parliament. We should be pushing for improvements. For example, when it comes to standards for hand luggage or when it comes to standards for compensation. That would be progress for passenger rights. And that's what we will be looking at in negotiations with Member States as a Parliament. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for sticking to your time. The next speaker on behalf of the Greens is Vicente Mata Ibañez.
Gracias, Presidenta. Señorías.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, it was 10 years ago that the Court of Justice said very clearly that having to pay for your suitcase is illegal. It's an integral part of the journey, and travellers can't go without it. And what have airlines done for the last 10 years? Well, they've ignored this, ignored courts, and made money, because in 2024, because of the illegal charging for hand luggage, companies have charged 10 billion euros in Europe alone. At the same time, every week we receive hundreds of complaints from citizens, travellers, because their rights are not being respected. And what happens when a minister decides to fine the airlines for these abuses? Well, very quickly, after 10 years, the Council suddenly reaches an agreement, but not to protect or strengthen passenger rights, but to restrict passenger rights. And to rule on something that's already been decided is illegal on hand luggage. And furthermore, there's an urgency procedure which is going to limit the capacity of this Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, we can't accept this. We're not going to accept this. And so I call upon us members of this Parliament to vote against this text when it comes to Parliament and support the rights of passengers. And we have to act how we have to remember why we're here. We've been elected to represent parliaments and citizens, not airlines.
The next half of the left is Arash Saidi.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, President. Good evening, Commissioner. I'd like to start by emphasising the constructive work which has been done with previous colleagues in order to find, as Andrei Novakov said, the right balance between passengers' rights and the health of the aviation sector. And I would like to underline the work that we've done with Mr. Novakov and also with other colleagues. And I'm saying this because there has been a very constructive environment in our working group. What we're trying to do is to improve passenger rights, and I'll give you just one example. That has to do with the additional costs. Now, it's not right that sometimes when you take a flight with some companies, the additional costs are caused because you forgot to register online and you arrive at the airport and you have to check in at the airport, or your luggage is 3 centimetres too big, or it wasn't included in the price of the ticket. Things that everybody would take for granted. This is problematic, and this is why we won't set up on this issue of the ticket price, because at some point you end up in the plane and people say, well, you've got your shoes on and that's going to cost you extra. It's not happened yet, but there's no financial justification for adding sometimes plus 20% to the ticket price without any transparency, because you attract passengers by advertising a very low price, and then you add all the tax and costs, and the ticket costs 2 or 3 times as much. And just to give you a figure to finish, last year, 10 billion euros turnover was made by aviation companies on ticket prices for a cost which was 20 times lower than that figure. The speaker has been interrupted by the President. I'm afraid the examples were interesting, but you've exceeded your speaking time. The next speaker is Stanislav Stoyanov on behalf of ESF.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Commissioner, as for the protection of air passengers, this should be our prime objective. Probably there are good reasons for the 4-hour threshold, but we should not take the issue lightly. We should not damage passengers. Let us also think of the general concept. Air carriers often delay the payment of compensation for days, even for weeks, despite the current rules. Passengers are not always well informed about their compensation, their right to compensation. The price building of tickets is not transparent enough. It must be clear what is comprised in the price of a ticket, particularly with regard to hand luggage. As for refundable travel vouchers that should replace compensation, I do not think that this is the right solution. We should protect the rights of air passengers who do not travel just for pleasure. We should not miss the opportunity to achieve results that are in favour of all our citizens.
President, Mr. Slapka, Mr. Tzitzikostas, ladies and gentlemen, so the rights of air passengers is part of consumer protections. And unfortunately, it's being deconstructed. And fortunately, with the Commissioner proposal, we have a certain improvement. There's a need, indeed, to work on this particular issue. The law in place right now is 21 years old, and it's already been 12 years in the making, proposals for changes. I'm glad that this particular issue is being touched upon finally, but unfortunately, what we see here, these changes are a frontal attack on the rights of passengers. And, of course, it creates an undermining of the credibility of the institutions to a certain extent. It can't work this particular way. Consumers have to be protected. We have to protect passengers, and we have to also protect the industry as well. Unfortunately, this particular worsening of the status quo is something that can't be accepted. It can result in a political disaster. Once again, we're open to negotiation. This has been on the table since 2014. We have to work together with undertakings, but we don't want any slippage as far as the rights are concerned. We have to work together in a concerted fashion, and so that of course, the 3-month period is a relatively short one to be able to work on this, but indeed, we have to work for passengers and together with the industry as well. Thank you.
Danielsson.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Danielsson.
Fru talman, kommissionären, ministern. Vi välkomnar naturligtvis.
Thank you, Commissioner, Ministers. We welcome the fact that the Council has finally reached an agreement on a position regarding passenger rights. However, regrettably, the Council's position is inadequate. Extending the compensation threshold from 3 to 4 hours is a step backwards and unacceptable for Parliament. For many passengers, this means that the right to compensation disappears. We often speak of simplification, but why not take the obvious step and introduce automatic payments for delays? Because at the moment you have to send in all kinds of forms and wait months to enjoy this right. Why should families with children still have to pay extra to sit together on flights, to sit with their children? It should be a matter of course that children can sit next to their parents without charge. We in Parliament will do our part to ensure stronger protection for Europe's travellers. Thank you.
Julien Leonardelli.
Merci Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Commissaire, Mesdames et Messieurs, chers collègues.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Once again, the Commission is making promises to mask its failures and is now proposing new laws. It's talking about revising passenger rights, but once again, it doesn't do what they should be doing, which is protecting European citizens against this highly liberalised systems. The European single sky has failed. Trying to control the market has led to passengers abandoning the market and going to low-cost airlines where they're treated without respect and without any effective recourse when there is delay or cancellation. And instead, the Council is trying to support the rights of airlines rather than national or passenger interests. Let's be clear. This is a new step in this orchestrated deregulation. We, in the Patriots under Bardella, will refuse any type of technocratic Europe. We want to see a Europe of its nations which will protect its citizens, provide real protection for travellers, put an end to the impunity for airlines and support for our nations. We don't want to see humiliation. We want to see respect and dignity. Thank you.
The next speaker is Michele Piccaro.
Gentile President.
So we want simple regulations in order to provide for any sort of compensation for passengers in case of delays. This is something which, of course, touches upon the lives of millions of European citizens. So it's extremely important to provide for these particular individuals with the rights in all circumstances. Thinking about the need for clear procedures for reimbursements, quicker reimbursements as well, and a greater transparency in the contact between companies and passengers. Also accessibility for individuals with disabilities or people who are vulnerable as well. So we have to have a clear objective system with everything clearly divided without the need for interpretation. As it's been right now, it's a fragmented system where every country interprets according to its desire. So we have to have clear regulation, and of course at the same time we need to support the competitiveness of the sector.
Aguirre Martinez.
Comisario, Ministro. Commissioner, Minister, we've spent more than 10 years waiting for the revision of this regulation, and what we can say today is that what we have received today is not at all to our taste. The agreement that has been reached is a direct attack on passenger rights. That's true when it comes to compensation for short-haul flights. It's the case because it also reduces compensation and the claim periods, and it is also true because it makes it easier to charge for hand luggage. And if that were not enough, when it comes to persons with disability, people who sometimes have to take an accompanying person with them, they have to pay for the full cost of that person's ticket price, something which had also been resolved for other forms of transport. We know that it's difficult to manage this. All of us are travelling more, but when it comes to striking a balance, this cannot be at the cost of the rights of passengers. So for that reason, we will not accept this proposal and a step backwards when it comes to the rights of the passengers.
Nina Carberry.
Thank you, Madam President. Flight delays, cancellations, ruined plans. Many of us have been there, but thanks to EU-wide legislation, we have strong air passenger rights in place to deal with these circumstances. Despite the fact that there has been much stalemate in this area over the past 10 years, some of the recent moves by the Council earlier this month are to be welcomed. Creating simpler and clearer rules, especially reducing time delays and in allowing people to claim their compensation and reducing complex red tape is a step in the right direction. Passengers should not have to wait for many months or even years to hear back from an airline on legitimate claim for compensation. Airlines should comply with stricter information obligations, especially regarding the handling of complaints and requests. And so the move to require pre-filled compensation forms for cancelled flights is very welcome. However, the existing reimbursement rules, which have been standard for many years now, should remain in place. And so, in line with previous European Parliament positions, any move to significantly water down existing passenger rights will be opposed in this Parliament. We have not revised the air passenger rules for 20 years now, and while it is high time to do so, I believe we must find a balanced solution to these challenges, working with airlines, but it cannot come at the expense of consumer protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rosa Serrano Sierra.
Thank you very much, President. Commissioner, the agreement of the Council on passenger rights is backstepping, which is unjustifiable. Rather than move forward for greater protection, much more robust protection, we're taking steps backwards. And the airlines have a broader margin in order to deal with the situation. The threshold, that 4-hour threshold, increasing it, is unacceptable. What can we say to our citizens? That their time is worth less? Socialists believe in a Europe that protects, and this particular agreement creates greater difficulties as far as reimbursement and compensation. It's not automatic, and it doesn't reduce the burden upon the passenger in claiming their rights. Quite to the contrary, it complicates, it causes delay, and we can't just push these people aside. And, of course, this negotiation, it must involve passengers as well. We, as Parliament, are going to try to change the focus, shift it, to make it clear that it's not a privilege, it's a right, and rights are not negotiated in this particular fashion. Thank you.
Anna Maria Vicek.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Commissioner, I will speak in Hungarian.
Last year's Hungarian presidency resulted in putting on our agenda again the regulation on air passenger rights. It hasn't been spoken of for 5 years before that. We Hungarians believe that this 20-year-old outdated regulation should be replaced by a new modernized version. We are convinced that we should not reduce the current level of protection of passengers. On the contrary, we need a regulation which is easy to interpret and which provides real protection under current circumstances in air travel. It is unfortunate that the Polish presidency did not continue the work as determinedly as the Hungarians started it. This is why it's important for the Commission to create a very detailed study which examines the results of the planned changes from the point of view of passengers as well as from the point of view of the industry. Hungary is committed to protect the passenger rights in theory as well as in practice. Thank you.
President, the old heartbreaking stories, a delayed flight, a connection cancelled, you're left in the lurch on your own. A holiday trip ruined, a family wedding missed. And if you look for help, it's back and forth between the airline and the booking provider. This revision wants to put a stop to all of that. You won't have to accept whatever offer from the company, a 24-hour delay, or even worse, nothing. Airlines will have to propose an alternative within 3 hours, or you will be entitled to find your own solution, maybe with a different airline, or by train, or a mix of both. And those other companies will be entitled to 4 times the price of the value of the original ticket to compensate for the unforeseen expense. Now, the airline will have to deal with the problem. They will have to provide pre-filled forms and provide an answer within 2 weeks. This is a simple process, easy and efficient for Europe's passengers. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Borja Jiménez Laras.
Gracias, Presidente. Thank you, President. Commissioner, the European Union is at the vanguard when it comes to protecting passenger rights. European rules have for years given certainty to passengers and protected thousands of people who fly day after day. So we can be proud of that. But we have also witnessed a deterioration of conditions facing passengers, and that is not something we can allow. We have 2 proposals before us, 2 proposals which are an opportunity to reverse that trend. The Council, in its position, has already spoken out, but we don't like that approach. Passenger rights should be strengthened, not diluted. We should not be watering things down. The Parliament should stand firm. We want there to be the possibility for passengers to take hand luggage without additional cost. The Court of Justice of the EU has made that clear. Hand luggage is a vital part of travel, and the current rules guarantee reimbursement for delays over 3 hours. We strongly oppose any attempt to water that down. We think that sitting next to family members should not be a privilege. Elderly people should also be able to get a printed version of their boarding cards, and we want clear standards. We want an ambitious position. Citizens should feel that the EU works for them. They should feel that we stand by them. This proposal is an opportunity to strengthen that trust and to protect the shared interests of Europeans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is François Calfon.
Colleagues, Commissioner, Europe has been built by acquiring new rights for consumers, including in air transport. But now, under pressure from lobbies and just before we all go on holidays, the Commission is imposing a backsliding of air passengers' rights. We will not allow this. First of all, passengers who have a 3-hour delay on their flight, for example, if they're going to Paris to Rome, has a right to €250 compensation. Tomorrow, to get this compensation, the delay will have to be over 4 hours. And yet 60% of delays are not subject to any compensation. Secondly, hand luggage will be an additional charge for passengers, which is not the case today. And charging for this is against European court case law, which would protect the consumer. So we need to put an end to this giving into pressure from lobbies and finally support passengers and ensure that their rights are respected. From next week, in the Parliament, we will be voting to ensure that hand luggage is once again free without paying any additional fees, and you can count on us.
The next speaker is Erne Şala-Baroş.
Tisztelt elnök asszony!
Thank you, Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen. Since the epidemic, we've seen a number of problems in air traffic, delays, lost luggage, and the airlines trying to get rid of responsibility in a very cynical manner. Our citizens wait for compensation for weeks. This is not equitable. It is unjust. Our experience is very clear. The existing legal framework is obsolete and offers insufficient protection in this new era. How is it possible that in the 21st century, citizens have to live their lives by the rules invented for the 20th century? This is simply not acceptable. It's been more than a decade since the process was started. We want a consumer protection system that is predictable, where rules are actually implemented. Thank you.
The next speaker is Nikolina Brynjac.
Air traffic is of key importance for the mobility in Europe, especially for countries like Croatia, who depend on tourism. However, that mobility must be connected with passenger rights. I definitely welcome new developments in the Council, but we can ignore the fact that they are trying to diminish current compensation. Diminishment of passenger rates is a definitive step backwards. We must not change that. Passengers deserve legal certainty, simple and transparent rules, and not new barriers. I also welcome new rules regarding the assistance given to the passengers. At the same time, we have to be aware of the challenges faced by the airline industry, starting from the geopolitical instability, energy crisis, and sustainability pressure. Airlines must have realistic obligations that will not endanger them. That means that the legal framework must be stable but also flexible and balanced. This framework must protect passengers, but also the airline sector. Thank you.
Gonçalves. Obrigado, Presidente, Senhor Comissário.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Apostolos Tzitzikostas, President. One of the greatest achievements of the European Union has been the protection of citizens' rights, especially consumer rights. Many people question the usefulness of the Union and its legislation. And now the Council proposes to limit passenger access to compensation for delays. Shocking indeed. This would reduce the incentive for companies to run on time and to restrict a right widely used by citizens. We often talk about the need to cut red tape, but we have to be consistent. As things are right now, if a flight is delayed, it is up to the passenger to start the process, gather documents, and contact the airline. But all this data is already available to airlines. If we want to simplify, it should be simplification that provides to the citizen and helps citizens. If a flight is delayed and a passenger is entitled to compensation, it should be done automatically, as befits a modern, fair, and effective European Union. Thank you very much.
Just imagine that your flight has been delayed. You have to wait in the airport for hours, you can't make your connecting flight, and all of your plans are ruined. Normally, you should be able to request compensation if your flight is delayed for more than 3 hours. But now there is a proposal on the table that this right to compensation will be significantly restricted by increasing the minimum time. Here, there is a risk that people's rights will be undermined. Passengers will get a lot less protection. Furthermore, the current procedure to request compensation is already very complicated, and actually 2 out of 3 travellers don't get their compensation in practice. Instead of protecting citizens, it seems that the EU is now only listening to the wishes of the airlines. Passenger rights have to be protected, not hollowed out, because any passenger affected should be able to get what they have a right to.
Much. The next speaker is Sophia Kircher.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, Minister, colleagues, many of you will be familiar with this. You have an important flight coming up, and it's all booked, you've checked in, and you get to the airport. And then comes the nasty surprise. You have several hours of delay, or perhaps the flight is cancelled altogether. The consequences are multiple. You miss appointments, and nerves are frayed. And then comes the real problem. You have to fill in forms, you wait for hours on hotlines, and you just hope that you will eventually get to your destination. At times like that, passengers' rights should kick in. Now, these were hard-won rights. They were negotiated with some difficulty, and now we can't imagine life without them in the EU. They're not a luxury at the gate. They're something that we cannot do without. So if we're going to reform passenger rights, I would reject any weakening of them. If we're talking about changes, then it should be to improve those rights, not a downgrade. Thank you.
Very much. The next speaker is Isabella Tovalieri.
La cancellazione o ritardo di un volo.
A flight being delayed or cancelled has significant impact on people's lives and works. It can ruin a holiday that you've sacrificed for. You might lose business, and today the EU is trying to limit passenger rights by increasing the hours of delay necessary for you to exercise your rights or be reimbursed, and increasing the times for you to have protection from other flights. We are against any attempt of undermining consumer rights. And at the same time, we will continue to fight absurd green rules, such as those that are ruining our airlines, which mean that they, and only they, have to use certain environmentally friendly fuels, 50% higher than normally, and other foreign companies aren't subject to these rules. Europe finally has to stand alongside the people who have helped Europe to grow and prosper. We have to protect our citizens and our companies.
Redner ist Markus Ferber, bitte schön.
3 Stunden Flug.
3 hours of delay gets on your nerves, and the failure of airlines telling us, first of all, that we have to be at the airport 2 hours before departure. That means you're sitting 5 hours at the airport and you're not closer to your final destination. Of course, reimbursement is necessary. Now, the passenger rights that we have in the European Union are exemplary in the European Union, providing for passengers. Now, backsliding on these particular wonderful rights that people have, and increasing the waiting time from 3 to 4 hours, the delay time, and then reducing the reimbursement. This tells us something very, very unfortunate about the developments that are taking place. We have to have some sort of incentive for airlines to be on time, and that won't happen, of course, when, let's not forget that 85% of passengers in the future won't receive any compensation whatsoever. So the European Parliament, we have to through the Commission, we have to do whatever necessary, and the Council to do whatever necessary to not have any backsliding on this particular front. Perhaps in Council, airlines are being represented, but here in the Parliament, we're representing passengers. Thank you.
Lukaczewska.
Thank you. Ms. Lukaczewska, next.
Thank you. I don't think we are that in agreement in this chamber. Often we do not agree to the weakening of passengers' rights. It raises many doubts. Firstly, increasing as many to 6 hours in transatlantic flights. This means the loss of the right to compensation for thousands of passengers. Now, reduced compensation. This does not reflect inflation or actual costs incurred by passengers. Now, shortened time of 6 months when you can submit the form, this can be to the detriment of the elderly who do not know the procedures. And then extending this list of special circumstances, including also strikes or other circumstances. This is contrary to the judgments of the Court of Justice. This is something that the airlines should be prepared for. Passengers' rights is not a privilege. This is the European standard. This is the basis for the UK, for Canada, for Turkey or Saudi Arabia. We do not agree to these rights being weakened. And now, the gist of these regulations should be the passenger, because airports without passengers are but aircrafts and buildings. It's about people, this European mobility, and it is for them that we want to create this law. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to Catch the Eye. Sergio Umberto.
Muito obrigado, Senhora Presidente, caro Comissário, caros colegas.
Thank you very much. So I am speaking here as a European citizen, but also as an MEP, and this is something very important, and it has consequences for the lives of millions of people in Europe. But I'd like to say the following. First of all, connectivity. Particularly in the far-flung regions, this is absolutely key. And it ought to be automatic, of course, any sort of compensation if there's delay or if there's some sort of failure as far as the contract between passenger and airline. And, of course, 3 hours, not 4 hours. So that we don't risk sending the message out that we're taking steps backward. We want to protect European citizens above all. And we have to, of course, guarantee that protection through measures that show that we are supporting, basically, that these particular rights are protected. It looks like we're having backstepping rather than moving forward.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Thank you very much, President. How many times has the Petitions Committee in this Parliament been faced with passengers dealing with delays, problems with luggage and compensation? As my colleague has said, now we have an opportunity to speed up improvements in rights, and yet the Council is trying to break our progress. 4 hours of delay before you get any compensation, and then it can take months to actually get it. And what about hand luggage? 10 years ago, the Court of Justice said that it is illegal to charge for hand luggage. These are issues that affect millions of people across Europe, and their rights are at stake every day. The airlines act with impunity. They don't only deceive people, they cancel flights, and, for example, in Galicia, people buy tickets and then they end up having to pay even more when they get to the airport. It's not fair that lobbies and major airlines should dominate our decision-making, and that we fail to take into account the voice of so many passengers. We should be listening to the people.
The next speaker is Elena Kuntura.
Thank you very much, President. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, for 12 years we've been waiting for the position of the Council on the revision of the air passenger rights regulation. Rather than provide solutions to the problems that exist, unfortunately, they've dug their heels in, and not only that, but they're chipping away at those rights that already exist. The 4-hour increase, this is something which, of course, will affect numerous passengers which are suffering terribly on this particular front and which are not having their rights protected. We have unacceptable practices which have been adopted by certain airlines. They impose additional charges for hand luggage or for additional luggage, and rather than really rendering a service in an effective fashion that provides for the passengers, quite the opposite. The burden to be placed on the airline, not the passengers. And, of course, changes have to take place, but we ought not have any deterioration on the passenger rights fronts. We have to protect our passengers above all. Thank you.
Speaker under Catch the Eye, because of time reasons, is Magdalena Adamowicz.
Szanowna Pani
President, Commissioner, Minister, well, we haven't been so unanimous in this room for a long time. More than 1 billion passengers of European airlines every year, nearly 100 million per month. So who is a single passenger waiting for 3 hours because his flight has been delayed or cancelled or his luggage has been lost? For him, it may be a disaster. For an airline, he's just one of 1 billion passengers. The more we fly, the more we need to protect our rights. Airlines are profitable enough to pay for their mistakes. Automatic compensation is a very good solution for the passengers. But if we want to improve the protection of passengers, then we should not apply a method where we have automatic compensation, but at the same time we extend the time of delay that applies. People buy air tickets to reach their destination. The speaker has been cut off.
Now the next speaker is our Commissioner, Apostolos Tzitzikostas, and please also respect the time limit of 5 minutes. And I also want to ask to keep quiet in the room because we want to listen with respect to the Commissioner.
Honourable members, thank you for your very, very interesting comments, and in particular for your commitment to protecting European passengers, which is also my priority. I take note of your concerns, which you will certainly have the opportunity to raise with the Council. I want you to know that my objective and the objective of the proposal of the Commission is to ensure, on the one hand, the effective protection of passenger rights, and on the other hand, to provide sufficient operational and financial flexibility to air carriers. Of course, and I want to underline that, the Commission encourages both institutions to engage in good faith, to continue the spirit of excellent cooperation that you have often demonstrated, and to pursue negotiations in a way that ensures that we have the best possible chance of finding a balanced, fair and reasonable compromise. Now, I understand that most, if not all of you, want even more rights for passengers. And I agree with you. So I pledge today to you that during the trilogues we will have the negotiations, and the Commission's position will be to make an effort to reach the best possible balance that will allow the passengers to have even more rights. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the European Parliament, I really believe that through this democratic process that is starting now, after having managed, and I congratulate the Council for that, to unblock this file, we will have the chance to do what is right for the passengers and what is right for the European airlines and for the efforts that we all do to make our European industry and our European aviation sustainable on the one hand, but also competitive on the other. So, Minister, thank you again very much for your efforts, and we are looking forward during this presidency to move on with the trilogues and find an amicable agreement. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kommissar. Als nächstes.
Thank you, Commissioner. The last speaker in this debate will be Adam Slapka on behalf of the Council, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Mr. Commissioner, honourable members. Thank you very much for this frank and fruitful discussion. Air passengers' rights have been and will remain a European landmark for EU citizens. We have together the responsibility to adopt legislation that will address effectively the needs of our citizens, and I'm confident that we will reach an agreement on this major piece of legislation. Thank you very much for this. And, Madam President, since this is my last statement during the Polish presidency, I would like to thank you very much, Madam President, and all honourable members of the European Parliament and the Commission for our common work. When we were setting the agenda and the priorities of the Polish presidency, we were thinking about the responsibility and security. And I think that this 6 months was very good cooperation between Council and the European Parliament. I'm very glad for this House, for this cooperation. And I'm sure that we did a very big step to make Europe more secure and safer. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Vielen Dank, Herr Minister, und auch für die.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for all of your work as part of the Council presidency. That closes the debate, and it brings us on to our next item on the agenda, the joint debate on the situation in the Middle East. And we have declaration of the